A couple of years ago, we were looking around to see what we were really good at. And it turned out that we had a lot of expertise in invasive species. And then when we looked around the state and around the Gulf Coast region, we discovered that there wasn't really an invasive species center in this part of the world. It's kind of amazing because, invasive species are such a big problem. Texas is a big state and it's a perfect corridor for invasive species to come into the United States. So just not having a center was kind of remarkable in itself. And then the fact that we had a lot of expertise just made it a natural that we would start to develop a center. And what we've come up with, I think, is really probably the most comprehensive center in the United States. Invasive species are a giant problem in the United States, and in fact, they cause about $130 billion worth of damage a year in the United States. And to put this into perspective, all of the natural disasters together don't amount to $130 billion a year. So invasive species are really just kind of like a natural disaster that is happening throughout the year and not at a single instance like a hurricane or something. So because of that, it's kind of gone under the radar how important invasive species are. One of the invasive species that we're working on is the what was called the raspberry crazy ant. Now it's being called by a lot of people the tawny crazy ant. But this is a species that came into Texas less than 10 years ago from South America. And since its introduction, it has rapidly started to spread throughout Texas. I believe it's now in 26 counties. It's also found in Mississippi, Alabama, Florida. It's just really moving throughout the United States. And in fact, it probably will end up with a distribution something like the red imported fire ant.
I got into crazy ant research when I started my dissertation, and what drew me to it was there was a real need for somebody to pick up the research after my predecessor left. He had done some basic identification and a little bit of management, but besides that, there was nobody else researching this ant. And it was a real problem. The problem with the crazy ant is that they occur in these population densities that are enormous, that can really be described as plague-like proportions. And homeowners are they're left feeling hopeless because they don't feel like there's anything that they can do to manage these ants, and really they're right. And so somebody needed to pick up the torch and carry on the research. East Columbia, Texas is where the largest crazy ant infestation that I'm aware of is. That whole community is entirely infested. Not one house does not have the crazy ants.
My name is Flem Rogers. My wife and I own the ACOT Cruise Bed and Breakfast. That's what we're in right now. We're in East Columbia, Texas, one of the initial areas originally impacted by the raspberry crazy ants. It can be horrid. We have a pavilion next door that we used to do outdoor events with. At times, the raspberry crazy ants can affect that so much that if food is placed out on a table, within 10 or 15 minutes, we're having problems with the food. So it's necessitated an extra level of treatment to try to keep them down. But it's a severe balancing act because on one hand, we don't want to poison the earth that we live on, but on the other hand, we have to try to find a way to keep these ants so that we can inhabit this area and enjoy this area. We've found times where our water well systems, the points of them have been completely covered with ants. And I don't mean a coating of 5 or 10 or 15 ants. I mean to the point where you lift the cover of the points off of your water well system, and what you have in there is a ball of ants about the size of a tennis ball, just immensely dense. Anything around here that makes electrical contact and emits any type of an ozone attracts those ants. A light switch, a telephone switch, anything. And in that effect, it's made us living here very, very difficult at times.
My name is Cheryl Rogers. I live in East Columbia. I am a permitted state and federally licensed rehabilitator with the Wildlife Center of Texas, which is located in Houston. I primarily do birds and deer. Those are my two specialties. The raspberry crazy ants make a big impact on my caging and housing facilities for these animals. The ants congregate around their water and their food. But they also, even for the high perches for the birds, will go up the perches and harass the animals on those high perches. So with the birds, there's no place for them to go in a caged situation until they're released. And even out in the population, they're going to have to deal with it some, but at least they can move away from it.
Crazy ants, whenever they occur in a population, they're completely ubiquitous. There's not a place that you can step without stepping in crazy ants. They swarm over everything, over your feet, crawl up your legs to about your mid-calf, and then run back down. They forage up every single tree, and you can't do anything without them infesting your life. We're at the site of Gaddis and Susan Vityen's house in Lamarck, Texas. They've been dealing with the crazy ants for a couple years now, and they've been very helpful in allowing us to do the research on their property. We've been testing a couple of different management strategies, as well as looking at the flight phenology of the crazy ants. As you can see, they're piling up around the house due to different treatment strategies, as well as the live ants are just crawling over where the dead ants are piling up.
Good morning, my name is Gaddis, my wife's name is Susan, and we've been in Danny's program the last 2 seasons.
Really about 2 years ago when I was weeding the flower bed, I noticed rows of ants just running crazy. And I noticed that they weren't biting me, they were all over my arms. And so we knew they weren't the fire ants. And then we started noticing we didn't have fire ants anymore. So we contacted our pest control people, and they came out and told us they thought we had crazy ants. And I think they went ahead and treated around the house, but the problem just got worse and worse.
If you'll get a shot of all of the trees that are on this property, and just imagine this at the base of every single one of them, and you'll get an idea of why it's such a challenge to control these ants more than about a month. We can kill a lot of ants, but they're so productive. They produce so many offspring that they just flood right back into the area from untreated areas.
About a week ago, we had been gone on a little trip, and when I came home, the patio was just thick with ants. And when I swept them up, I swept up big piles of them. And when I put them in a bag, a grocery bag, it completely filled that bag up with dead ants. And when you look around, you'll see there are mounds of them, like in the crevices, where sometimes I try not to just sweep them off, because if you allow all the dead bodies to stay, they start to smell bad. So you have to sweep them up and bag them and get them in the trash as quick as possible. You can even see them in the pool. In the summer, it's really sort of yucky because they'll be on the surface of the pool. And then you can get in and sort of, splash a little bit and get that surface tension to make them go down. But you can see it, especially in the hot tub, where they just mound up in there. So it's, it's always another dustpan full of ants every day almost. A couple of the treatments that Danny did, we saw some results for a couple weeks. I think 4 weeks was about the longest that helped. And then it seemed like they just came right back, so yeah.
I asked Danny about the numbers, and one treatment he said, well, I think we've got a 95% good result here. I said, 95%, I did some math, must mean we have a trillion ants. So anyway, even 95%, we were happy with that, but it was still unbearable.
Yeah.
Yeah, outside of the academic community, my goals are to help people. There's a great need for crazy ant management, and there's nothing available to consumers or even to pest control operators that will provide more than about a month worth of control of the crazy ants. So my goal is to help the community.
Now, our idea is that if we can start working on this early and find management strategies for the crazy ant, maybe we can keep it from becoming a problem like the red imported fire ant is. So we've really made this research on the crazy ant one of the main focuses of our invasive species center.